Willkommen zurück. Welcome back. Let's get right into the action. I will give you a brief overview, not just over the course, but specifically what sort of sentences we have in German and what is different as far as the syntax is concerned. As you see here, we have different types of clauses, of sentences. Clause actually means sentence. It is very, very similar to English. Actually, you have main clauses, you have subordinate clauses. Main clauses are linked by a so-called conjunction. A subordinate clause is initiated by a so-called subjunction because they have different levels, the main clause and the subordinate clause. You might also have a linking part, which is called a subjunctional adverb. And I will explain to you later on what this actually means. It's really, really interesting because once you master the difference between these classes of words, you actually are not far away from being actually better than most native speakers of German because, believe it or not, this aspect gives a lot of headache to native speakers as well. Then we have questions with yes and no. And for instance, do you like fish and chips is a question which you can answer with yes and no. And questions which have an interrogative pronoun, which would be when and why. And as we have it in English, actually all interrogative pronouns, as question words, start with a W in German. So the main clause is quite easy. You have, and this is basically the most important aspect of the syntax in German, because the main clause is the most widely used clause in German. The infinite verb comes at the end, and the finite word, which is the conjugated one, linguists call it the finite verb, comes on the second spot. We're going to deal with this aspect very extensively over the next lessons because it is the fundamental principle of the German syntax. And besides this, you have a very high amount of flexibility, how you can actually arrange the words or the particles in a German sentence. When you have two main clauses, very, very easy. You have twice the same syntax. The conjugated, the finite verb comes on the second spot. And in between, you have a comma and you have a so-called conjunction, which is just 6. There are just 6. Und, oder, aber, then, sondern auch. Over the course of this module, I'm also going to translate you a couple of these words. So when you have two main clauses, they're simply linked by a conjunction. There are 6 of them. You have them here, and you shouldn't have any big problems whatsoever. Subordinate clause is initiated by a subjunction. We call it Nebensatz in German. So you basically have the subjunction, which initiates the subordinate clause. Then comes the subject, and then the objects, and basically the filling of the subordinate clause. And at the end, you have the conjugated verb. This is basically the second fundamental principle in subordinate clauses. The conjugated verb comes at the end. And then you have subordinate clauses which are initiated by a so-called conjunctional adverb. And there you have, again, a slightly different syntax. We will have lessons dealing just with that. You have the linking word, then you have the verb, so the predicate if you want, then the subject, and then the object. We will also make some exercises about it, so you should not worry. This is just a brief introduction. When you have questions, which you can answer with yes and no, it is like a main clause, but you simply switch the position of the verb and the subject. So simply start with the verb, and then comes the subject, and then the rest of the clause. Like, ich bin hier, I am here, is the main clause, und bin ich hier? A very smart question to ask. Am I here? Is basically the question. You simply switch subject and verb. It's that easy. And then last but not least, we are going to deal with questions which are initiated by an interrogative pronoun. So a question word if you want, and then you have another type of syntax. But as we mentioned, I'm going to go very slowly It is quite extensive. I will deal with any aspect in the whole module, so you should not be worried at all whatsoever. Very well then. See you next time. Whatever you do, enjoy. Bye-bye.